We have a lot to discuss in this video. UFC social media has been blowing up with news. We've got beefs, we've got breakups, and we've got other things that like it. And I figured we'd go ahead and make a video breaking all of that down. But before we jump in, I want to take one moment to ask that if you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. I'll go ahead and stop the promo there. We're going to jump straight into it. Pimblett recently did a podcast with MMA Guru in which he pretty much off the bat, when asked about Dan Hooker, in a metaphor, I think the right word is, or basically to describe Dan Hooker's grappling, he said Dan Hooker couldn't grapple a rapist off of his own mother. Now, those are very strong words. Analogy was the word I meant to use. Sorry, like or as. I forgot what a metaphor was. That's a very strong way to say that that Dan Hooker can't grapple. He could have said that he's very bad at grappling. He could have said, there's so many different ways to say that. And that might be one of the worst ways ever from Patty. Not a lot of thought there. It was definitely a way to start off the interview. That's just a really bad analogy. And it certainly pissed off Dan Hooker, him saying, "It's on site, you fat bitch." So clearly, he's going for the neck on this one. He's coming out of him. And not only did he say this after that, that is a very bold statement. Dan Hooker's an Aussie, man, which they can take a joke, but that's a pretty dark joke. Assault of one's mother is never something to really joke about in any way, shape, or form, especially as an analogy for something. There's so many better ways to say that. And Dan Hooker responds not with just calling him a fat bitch and it's on site, but he responds with this video saying, "Ain't said shit when we were face to face, bitch. I thought we were mates, but you're not a very good mate, are you? Rip Ricky." Now that was the insane low blow response from Dan Hooker. To be fair, if I saw what Patty said and it was directed towards me, I'd feel like going for the kill myself. So I can't blame Dan on this, and Dan's never been a guy to pull punches, so I don't know why we're surprised at this. Some people are hating on him like Darren Till, but obviously Till's going to back his scouts people, and some people are calling out Patty for not being able to take what he was dishing. So Dan Hooker mentions Ricky. Ricky was Patty Pimblett's best friend that killed himself, I believe, just a few days or a week before his fight in the O2 Arena in 2022, in which he gave his famous "Men Need to Speak Up" speech. It's heartbreaking that Patty Pimblett's friend went through that. Male mental health is no joke. It really is under advocated for. And it's just a bad situation all around because Dan retaliated in a way that should never be retaliated, but Patty kind of brought it on. And the MMA fan base is divided. Some of them are on Hooker's side, some of them are on Patty's side, and this is honestly insane. They're not even fighting. They've never even been talks of fighting. They've talked about each other, but there's never been serious talks about them having a match. This definitely builds up a potential beef if Hooker were to win his next fight and Patty, down the line fights Hooker. There's a big beef there. Really insane work. I mean, I would never make fun of somebody's friend who committed suicide, especially not under these circumstances. I think Dan could have gone about this just a little bit better. Still say horrible things to Patty because it's a very terrible analogy about how bad your grappling is. But a low blow nonetheless. Both of these men are in the wrong here. And we're probably not going to see much of it for the coming years, but I'm sure if there's a fight where they're backstage, I'd love to see the conversation. Maybe, they're both lads, so maybe they brush it off, kind of discuss what they meant and just let bygones be bygones. But I don't know. Hooker seems to be pretty mad about this, and Patty's responded saying, "Thought we couldn't be mates because I'm ranked above you. You took a hypothetical joke about how bad your grappling is and responded by talking shit about my mate who committed suicide. Now that's the lowest of the low, and onside is fighting by me. You're utter dog shit at fighting." Now Patty's with the smoke. He's saying, it was an analogy. It was a hypothetical joke about how bad his grappling is. But I think Patty needs to admit that is a pretty dark, pretty gruesome, and pretty poor taste joke about how bad someone's grappling is. I mean, he could have mentioned it about himself, couldn't grapple a rapist off himself, but about one's own mother. Those are just very dark undertones, jokes that you really don't venture into with, let alone even your friends. I mean, publicly with a UFC fighter. Like, it's just a bad thing to get into on Patty's end. I'm curious to see how Dan responds to this. Maybe he's had his say just for how, violent his response was. I'm not going to hold him, against it. I'm going to call both men on their wrongdoings and their fouls, but I'm not going to favor one over the other in this argument. It's a very dumb argument to begin with. Patty just shouldn't have used that, and I feel like Dan's right to be hurt, but he obviously used the wrong way to go about this. So a disgusting situation all around, but hopefully we see a fight come out of this. There could be some good beef there. Crazy way to start the day seeing this. I saw this morning. I think it broke last night, so I was asleep early for work the next day, and this morning while going into work I saw this and thought I have to make a video covering this. Hopefully we see a fight come out of this, but if not, I hope these two men resolve it because they're both fan favorites in a way, and it would kind of suck to see them hate each other for so long without ever getting the matchup between them. We move on to another beef that is broken. Surprise, surprise, John Jones calls Daniel Cormier a dickhead. He went off saying he was an asshole. I tried to make peace with him many times, and he made it very clear he wants to be enemies for the rest of his life. He's a dickhead, says the wife beater. Look at the way he treats his staff members. He bosses guys around. He wasn't very sociable. Cry. He'll always be in my shadow. Now, Jones, when you say something like that and then you wonder why somebody's a dick, maybe it's you. Maybe it's you saying horrible things about him, being a brat about the title fight, pissing hot, beating him, kind of stalling and downfalling his career in a way. You ruin the man's career and you still get called GOAT. You're a steroid cheat. You beat your wife into a bloody pulp to where your kids had to call the cops on you. In no way are you a likable human being. So why does Daniel have to like you? You can't just say that you want things to be settled and it's settled. You know, you've crossed some moral lines outside of Cormier, and I don't think you can just backstep and act like the good guy in this. And anybody defending Jones is an absolute fucking idiot in this situation, and everybody calling Jones out, the wife beater, the PED cheat, the, fowler in fights, saying he's a dickhead. It's pure hypocrisy by Jones, but we're not surprised by this. Jones acts like a 13-year-old girl online, never fights in person. I think they agreed on a RAF wrestling match later this year, so I'm excited to see that. Cormier said he would whoop Jones's ass. I'm not going to comment on that fight yet. We've seen Jones is always in shape for the most part in terms of fighting. DC's staying in shape. He's wrestling as much shape as he can get in. So I'm excited to see that if something... He said he would box him and wrestle him. I'm just as excited to see what comes out of this. If they have a third, match in any form, I'm sure it'll be entertaining. But I don't like this from Jones, calling Cormier out in such a way that sounds like an annoying girlfriend talking about her ex that she didn't really like. Because you're a horrible person to Daniel Cormier, and outside of that, I don't think he owes you anything. He doesn't need to have amends with you. You have been probably the worst person that Cormier has ever had to deal with in his life in terms of what you did to his career, how you treated him, how you brainwashed the fan base to treat him. Cormier, anytime Jones says something about Cormier and Cormier retaliates, the amount of Jones fans that say DC still thinks about him, I'm sure that pisses off DC, and I think DC has every right to never want to make amends with John Jones because it's not a competitive beef. Jones went somewhere with it, and Jones isn't a good person anyway, so why would he want to be good with you? It's just morally incorrect from Jones to assume that DC's the dickhead in the situation, not looking in the mirror for once in his life. That's really my 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cents about this. I guess we'll go ahead and move on to some more positive news. I say positive. It's just funny. Alex Pereira and Tracy Cortez have broken up after 7, 8 days. I want to say a week. So my video, I think it was 4 days ago, Alex Pereira and Tracy Cortez are dating, announced on New Year's Eve. These photos you see in this tweet here. And as of this morning, yesterday, Alex Pereira, quote, "Thank you, my fans, for all the love. I would like to communicate with you guys that even though me and Tracy share great moments together, we decided it would be better for the both of us to go our separate ways. I wish her nothing but the best in our journey, or in her journey." Classic act from Poetan. He posted himself running in the rain, saying God, does everything. Someone said middle school or shit. I kind of have to agree, but it's also Pereira, so it's tough in some way. But insane work. Tracy Cortez fastest finishes in 3 different weight divisions, to be honest. It was a week. We knew this wouldn't last. Some people were saying months. Kenny Okoye said 5 months. Some people were saying, a month, a few weeks. This was 1 week. We saw the video of Tracy Cortez waking up Pereira on the plane saying, "Will you marry me?" And he said, "Shaman." I think that then and there is when he said, "I'm leaving this girl." W for him just making the rounds. Tracy Cortez, this is just a bad look. I know Ortega's laughing his ass off at this situation because he was getting so much hate and critique, saying, "Oh, your bitch got stolen by Poetan." They've been gone. They've been done for years. So I'm sure he's having a bit of a chuckle at this. He's not going to say anything, of course. He's a very humble guy. But it's just funny to see this sort of Nepo plant couple just fall so quickly. I'm sure Pereira got grossed out pretty soon into the relationship off of Tracy's behavior, but maybe Tracy will come out and stir some beef up. And I've seen memes about Pereira bumping into Tracy at the UFC PI. So there's gonna be memes from this. There already are memes from this. This is hilarious. 1 week in and you're already done. It's absolute cinema. Pereira claims another. He's getting the Infinity Stones of the UFC. We'll see who he's with next. I know he posted some sparring footage today with another random chick. I'm sure Tracy's happy to see that. I mean, Pereira's a dog, dude. He's crazy. There's a reason he had kids so young. He's been at it before the money. And kind of a bad look for Tracy Cortez. This is the second official relationship she's had with a UFC fighter. The Paulo Costa one was just a joke. And it hasn't gone well, so we'll see what she says or does from here. It's funny as hell. But in some actual good news objectively because it's been proven. Ilya Taporia won his first legal battle against his ex-wife Georgina, who still has custody of his daughter, which he hasn't seen in months. The court ruled in favor of Ilya Taporia, dismissing all of Georgina's requests to travel with their daughter from Spain to Miami. Who said you can't meet your wife in Miami? Georgina argued that she needed to leave Spain due to online harassment. The judge dismissed his claim, noting that the flight ticket were purchased 12 days. Taporia released a statement. So she was trying to do this before harassment even happened. I understand there was semi-harassment when this first broke, just because people are going to favor Taporia. But yeah, she shouldn't get to move back to Miami with his daughter if he's living in Spain. You know, that's a world apart just because you're getting harassed when this was before Ilya even put out his first statement. You know, Ilya Taporia wasn't able to see his daughter for 4 months. I don't think he doesn't get to see his daughter for 4 months. And as soon as you start losing the legal battle, you want to just take his daughter to another side of the globe. That's very unfair. I think Rogan was right. Maybe not in how vulgar he described it, but this woman is not a good woman for any man, it seems. She's vile. She wants to keep her kids from their father when it looks like most of her claims have been kind of dismissed. It looks like she was lying about this, false allegations. We've yet to see how the rest of the case goes, but we saw Ilya was happy after this first one, and she looked rather upset. I believe Ilya is innocent. If I'm maintaining this opinion, then this is good for Ilya. This is good for 155. Speaking of 155, I also didn't have this tab pulled up, but I was supposed to mention it. Arman Saruki and Dana White recently did a podcast. I can't remember who the podcast was. Sorry about that. But Dana White, they asked him about Arman Sarukian and his 155 title shot, why he hadn't gotten it. And he said it was a multitude of factors. And then they soloed out the fact that was the headbutt a part of it against Dan Hooker at the weigh-ins where he shattered Dan Hooker's nose. Dana said, yes, absolutely. Now, the amount of people who are still coping about Arman not getting a shot, I get it in terms of a skill point. I just pressed the space button, so my thing moved. We are still undefeated. The amount of people defending Arman Sarukian saying he should get a shot need to kind of use their brain in a way. In terms of skill in his resume, he definitely deserves a shot, but he's fucked it up multiple times over and away. Pulling out on one day for a bad weight cut and then getting his ass covered by, the spine injury against Makhachev. That was terrible. That's completely skewed the timeline for 155 to 170 divisions, honestly, even 145 at that point. So he threw a big wrench in the works, as well as the headbutting of Dan Hooker. You're being a little imp. You're not fighting for almost 2 years, and then when you first get your fight, against a guy like Dan Hooker, who is an honestly very winnable matchup for him, he headbutts him. But Dan Hooker could have been like, nah, fight's off, my nose is broken, I'm not going to win this fight. And Arman probably would have never gotten a title shot in his career again, but Dan Hooker's just that guy, as we know. But Arman potentially almost ruined a second main event for being what? He's a little spoiled rich kid and acts like it. And, it's hard to feel bad for him at this point. He's taking grappling matches against old people and Shar Magomedov, guys who have no ground game, or at least out of their prime for the most part. And he won't even take a fight. And the fight he does take, he almost ends it before it even happens. So it's bad behavior. It's stupid behavior. This is the same level as Manel Kape and Muhammad Mokaev. How can you be mad when the UFC doesn't give you what you want, despite you deserving it, when you act like a spoiled little kid who doesn't get what he wants? It's just... Arman needs to look at himself and be a bit more professional about this. I understand he has the money. He's got daddy's money back home. He doesn't need to fight, but he does it. But if you want to become a champ or even get the shot at a guy as illustrious as Ilya Taporia, you need to prove it. And if you're not a class act, what happens when you're the champ? Are you going to headbutt your contenders at the weigh-in and then all of a sudden the fight's off and you just completely remove the title defense like you did for Makhachev? I mean, it's just bad behavior from Sarukian, and for him and his fans to act as oblivious as they are as to why he's not getting these title shots or how he still deserves it in some way. It's just pathetic. On a skill level, he totally deserves it. 100% always will, always has since his win over Oliveira, which I thought was arguable. But you got to act the part. You can play the part of a fighter, but you got to act the part. You got to be somewhat professional. I know your job is literally cage fighting, where you can act like an animal on camera and nobody cares. Everybody celebrates you for it. But when you act like an animal outside the cage, you're a human and you can be held accountable for your actions. So you headbutting people, not taking fights. They offered him a Gamrot rematch, which he lost in a decision that he said he should have won. So why don't you take this fight and prove that you're deserving? No, I don't want it. That's disrespectful. Why would you even offer me that? You're entitled. You're spoiled. You haven't done that much, and you've ruined the company more than you've helped it. So that was my pretty opinionated piece there. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. But some crazy news broken this week. I'm curious to see how that Dan Hooker-Paddy Pimblett beef plays out. I hope those two guys make amends. But if it ends up in a fight that's beef, backstage drama, cinema, it's great. John Jones being a hypocrite yet again. He used to talk about how Aspinall only wanted to fight him because he was old now and out of his prime, yet he was 27 taking on a 35-year-old DC while he was on roids. So, hypocrite, liar, scared. Those are my John Jones character traits. Good news for Ilia Topuria, and just absolute laughable how quickly they broke up after this announcement. It was huge for the MMA community. I'm seeing fans going, me shooting my shot with Cortez now that Pereira's gone. It's just funny. But yeah, some fun news. I got another video coming out in a few days. Stay tuned for that, and see ya.